This is a follow-up lecture about Model Rule 3.6 regarding trial publicity for my law students. I would encourage you at some point to sit down and read through all of the comments to Model Rule 3.6 because they may clarify or kind of flesh out your understanding of the rule. I don't spend a lot of time on most of the rules in class because, to be honest, they just restate the provisions of the rule itself in more elaborate terms or wordy terms. Comment 5, though, is different, and so the comment that you need to focus your studying on for the MPRE under Rule 3.6 is comment 5. This actually used to be part of the rule for a few years, was moved into the comments by the ABA at some point, but the MPRE examiners are going to treat this comment as if it's still part of the rule. And frankly, that even if your jurisdiction has adopted the current verbiage of Rule 3.6, Comment 5 will then be persuasive authority in the same way that the ALIs or other commentary for the UCC or other uniform statutes or the restatement would be persuasive authority. So this is, Comment 5 deals with things that are presumptively prejudicial. And I want to explain something about this. You may remember that 3.6b is in some ways a safe harbor provision that goes through a number of items that are always okay to say to the press about your pending case. And things like the identity of the parties involved, the claims made, and procedural steps, and so forth in trial. And that's fine. What Comment 5 gives us is the mirror image of that, or the opposite of things that are presumptively prejudicial, or in other words, you're going to have to justify it because, and you should presume that you could be subject to discipline for doing these things. So Comment 5 says there are, on the other hand, certain subjects that are more likely than not to have a material prejudicial effect on a proceeding, particularly when they refer to a civil matter triable by a jury, a criminal matter, or any other proceeding that could result in incarceration. So this would also include, for example, an immigration case that could result in being put in a detention center. And here we go. Here's our subjects. 1, the character, credibility, reputation, or criminal record of a party, suspect in a criminal investigation, or witness, or the identity of a witness, or the expected testimony of a party or witness. Now, you may remember that under 3.6b, you are allowed to reveal the identity, including the home address and marital status and so forth, of a criminal defendant, of somebody who's the defendant in a trial. But you can't do that about the witnesses in the trial, like talk about ahead of time who's going to testify at trial. So we shouldn't talk about the identity of the witnesses or what different witnesses are going to say up front. That includes experts, but also lay witnesses or occurrence witnesses. I mentioned it in a previous video, a reference to the Trayvon Martin case, and that I thought that the prosecutor in that case, even though I thought that the death certainly warranted an investigation, the prosecutor, I think, made some inflammatory statements up front about George Zimmerman's guilt and malicious intentions and things like that, that not only undercut our presumption of innocence in criminal cases, that you're innocent until proven guilty, but probably violated this rule. And so as a prosecutor, you cannot have a press conference or even a plaintiff's lawyer or a defense lawyer where you go on a rant about what a terrible person the other party is, nor should you talk about how their arrest record or things like that. So everything on this list, it would be very easy to turn into a multiple choice exam question on my test or on the MPRE. Character and credibility and reputation of one of the parties, or the criminal record of one of the parties, or of witnesses. Okay, let's keep going. In a criminal case or proceeding that could result in incarceration, so we're not talking about cases that could only result in a fine, but incarceration, ones that could carry prison time, the possibility of a plea of guilty to the offense, or the existence or contents of any confession, admission, or statement given by a defendant or suspect or that person's refusal or failure to make a statement. So notice that they really could have broken this into a few different rules. So first of all, the prosecutor should not say, we're not going to offer a plea bargain in this case. That is against the rules. And you may say, well, I hear that on the news all the time. It violates the rule when they do. And nor should the defendant say, we will entertain a plea bargain. My client wants a plea deal or something like that. Don't say that to the media, even if it's true, while the trial is pending. The confession one we're very concerned about, because sometimes confessions, as you know, we have an elaborate body of law about when a confession is admissible in a criminal case under Fifth Amendment jurisprudence and Sixth Amendment jurisprudence, to be honest. And so the prosecutor, if there is a confession, they really shouldn't tell the media ahead of time, he confessed and admitted all of this. Nor should the defense attorney say, my client has already confessed to the crime. Don't talk about the confessions, because this is always very often a contentious part of the litigation in criminal cases. 3, the performance or results of any examination or test, or the refusal or failure of a person to submit to an examination of test, or the identity or nature of physical evidence expected to be present. And so what are we talking about with tests? Of course, DNA tests and lie detector tests or polygraph tests. And you probably know DNA tests usually are admissible and polygraph tests usually are not. So neither side in a criminal case should be talking about he refused to take a lie detector test, and you can, draw your own conclusions from that. Nor should the defense lawyer say, my client is willing to take a lie detector test. Nor should they be talking about test results, DNA test results. We have his DNA, or we found his DNA at the scene, or something like that. The lawyers involved in the case should not be saying that stuff. Now, if it's already out in the media because they talked to the police or the crime lab or something like that, that's not under the ethical rules that bind lawyers. But the lawyers involved in the case are not supposed to make statements about those things. 4, any opinion as to the guilt or innocence of a defendant or suspect in a criminal case or proceeding that could result in incarceration. Now, as a defense attorney, you can say, my client maintains his innocence, because that's an objective fact. What you shouldn't say, and I know this sounds like we're splitting hairs, is I know my client and I know my client didn't do it, right? And so conversely, we're even in some ways more worried about the prosecutor basically telling everybody he's guilty, 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 guilty before we've even had a trial. We do have a presumption of innocence. And in our day and age, our kind of media cycle culture, and especially on social media, there are times where someone is arrested for a high profile or notorious crime, and people are indignant about what happened, and they're basically kind of the online mob saying, string him up, and that's not how our legal system works, right? So we have a presumption of innocence, and the prosecutors should not say, in my opinion, this person is guilty of sin or something like that, or nor should the defendant. 5, information that the lawyer knows or reasonably should know is likely to be inadmissible as evidence in a trial, and that would, if disclosed, create a substantial risk of prejudicing an impartial trial. So let's tick off a few things that are often inadmissible, the evidence that are frustrating when you're a prosecutor, let's say, that you can't get in. The criminal record or rap sheet of the accused, right? So this person could have a long criminal history, and that's not what they're on trial for. They're on trial for the current crime. Secondly, as we already talked about, polygraph tests, usually inadmissible. How about the evidence from a search where the police illegally did an illegal search without a warrant? If it's going to be inadmissible, you shouldn't be working around the exclusionary rules by telling the media about it, so that when we finally pick a jury, everybody on the jury knows about this evidence from the illegal search or an illegal confession or something like that. And so those are a few of our big inadmissible things. And then don't forget, if you're taking evidence, hearsay, right? So you have hearsay evidence, and the prosecutor can't say, I don't know, I hear a lot of people who say, this person did this. There's a lot of people online saying this. That's hearsay, right? And so you, as the lawyer in the case, should not be talking about that, nor should the defense attorney be talking about evidence that the defense attorney knows is going to be inadmissible at the trial because of its irrelevance or its hearsay or something. Okay, 6, we're almost done, I promise. The fact that a defendant has been charged with a crime, unless there's included therein a statement explaining that the charge is merely an accusation and that the defendant is presumed innocent until and unless proven guilty. And again, I want you to think about some of the press conferences that you've seen prosecutors hold in these high-profile cases, like the George Zimmerman case, where the prosecutor kind of really demonizes the suspect, the person facing charges. And so you shouldn't even say they're being charged with a crime unless you are going to add a caveat. And of course, it is only an accusation and they will be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Okay. By the way, one last thing about this as an example for my students that's a little more recent memory. After the Parkland shooting, where a troubled young man, Nicholas Cruz, went into a local high school and went on a rampage shooting, basically, and killed a lot of people. Unusual for these mass shootings, he was apprehended instead of dying at the scene by suicide or in the hail of gunfire. And so he was apprehended. News reported that that we all knew who had done it and stuff like that, or he didn't deny it or something like that. He almost immediately was appointed a public defender or defense counsel, and the media, I watched the clips where the media cornered his lawyer. And if you watch the clip from that lawyer got it just right under 3.6 and said basically, like, look, I think it's obvious that this seems to be a very troubled young man and it's a really sad situation, and just left it at that and didn't try to argue he's innocent or we're going to raise the insanity defense. It's okay to hint that that he has some issues. I don't think that was kind of public knowledge. And so in that case, what the defense lawyer did actually was an example of complying with the rules. Okay, that's it for 3.6. We'll be on to the next.